What is the right way to look at Chanakya? Is he a political philosopher, which is probably what an Arthashastra represents? Is he a kingmaker, what is now commonly termed as a power broker of sorts? Like, how do I place Chanakya in my mind?
So obviously, even in tradition, his different aspects have different names. So when we talk of him as a philosopher, usually the word Kautilya is used.
Okay.
Therefore, it's called Kautilya's Arthashastra, not Chanakya's Arthashastra, usual usage.
Mm-hmm.
And Chanakya or Vishnugupta Chanakya is used for him as an administrator and empire builder. So he was an empire builder. He was also an administrator. So he was a practitioner and a philosopher. So the Arthashastra is a document of his philosophy, which is, of course, was informed by the fact that he was a practitioner. And you can clearly see that. I mean, he has very specific injunctions about, what should the traffic rules be and the fines should be, what interest rate should be. So this is not just a guy writing general principles. He then, here are the principles and here is what the rules should be. So he's quite clear in that.
Very specific.
Very specific. So this is very different, by the way, from most other books. In fact, for hundreds of years afterwards, there are even his followers of later times like Kamandak, etc. are not as specific. He is very specific. He's very specific about how a town should be built, what is the width of the road, all these kinds of specifications he gives. I mean, what interest rate should be given? If a person takes a loan and he renege, what is the procedure for insolvency and bankruptcy?
It's in the same book.
It's in the same book. Here it is. It's a thick book. It's a thick book. This is a translation by Vachaspati Garola. So this is a pretty thick document. This is the English version of it.
Right.
Although this is edited down, but this is the commonly used one by Ranganathan. But you can have other versions of it as well. But point is, it's a thick book, and it gets into real details about how a military camp should be set up. What are the principles for engaging in foreign policy? For example, he has the mandala theory.
Okay.
So the mandala theory is you can think of yourself as a state, as a kingdom, and then you have kingdoms with whom you have borders. So one of his points he makes is that those with whom you share borders are very likely to be your enemies. But that principle also applies to them on the other side.
Right.
So very often your highest likelihood of your ally is going to be the kingdom on the other side of him. Things like that. So
the enemy of your enemy is a friend.
Enemy of your friend. So these are all these principles he has there. So similarly, he has all these. He talks about the various kinds of knowledge you need to run an empire. What are the principles of governance? So the book Arthashastra should be called. It's a treatise on governance and prosperity.
Okay.
And so he has in here very specifically talks about what are the areas of knowledge you need to know and to run an empire. And in this sense, it is a much wider book than Machiavelli's Prince, which is a very narrow book about doing court politics in a small state in Italy.
Yes.
It's trivial almost compared to the thinking level of Kautilya.
I was going to get into that because very often, the Western mind and probably the Western sort of view on this situation is that Chanakya is some kind of an equivalent to Machiavelli. And it seems like the Prince, which is largely this political psychology document of like, how do you manage to ascend to power? And this is
mostly about court intrigue.
Yes, right. This is way more specific.
Oh yeah, it's a much more sophisticated document. I mean, it does have something about court intrigue and spies and so on. But frankly, that is a very small part of it. I mean, it also has urban design discussion. It has a discussion on how to deliver justice. It has discussion how to regulate bad sectors, vice sectors. What to do about alcohol and
I see.
And how to regulate prostitution.
Huh.
All kinds of very specific. What are the rights and how what are the limitations? How do you manage a forest? All of this is given very clearly written out. Here are the principles. Here are how to apply those principles.
I wonder why could we not call it to some degree akin to a constitution? Like how is this different from a constitution?
No, it's not a constitution because it's more like a manual.
Okay.
A constitution would be slightly different because it would then have high level principles about how to
further create manuals.
Not just that, it would also talk about how the king should be elected, what are the principles. It doesn't get into that.
Right.
It assumes the existence of a state.
Okay.
And then it talks about the existence of and how that state should be governed once it is in existence. So I think it's better thought of as a governance manual.
Okay.
ब्रदर, ये क्वेश्चंस और ये पॉडकास्ट सुन के आपके भी दिमाग के चक्षु खुले ना, सो subscribe to this so that you can watch our podcast in small bits and clips while you are busy and wasting your life away.